We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean?
As you might have noticed from the previous videos on this channel, Pope Francis has been a leading advocate for Sunday being observed as a day of rest in order to combat climate change. His encyclical Laudato Si serves as the foundation for legally mandated Sunday worship. The link is in the description. You are free to watch them after this if you haven't done so. In the later part of the previous video on the fulfillment of Revelation 13 verse 17, we talked about how digital currency is being linked to climate change and their plans to track your everyday activities, especially in relation to carbon emissions. In this video, we are going to look at the details of how the digital currency is gaining popularity around the world, the link it has with climate change and Sunday laws, how they plan to carry out their strategy, how it is going to impact your freedom as they monitor your daily carbon emission, and what the consequences will be if you disobey their orders. I urge you to stick around this video so you can understand every detail, because the more time you spend watching it, the better you will understand it. Let's get into it, starting with the Arnold and Porter's website. Federal Reserve Board to kick off climate scenario analysis in 2023. You can see right away that a financial institution is associated with climate change. What is the connection? Let's see what happens. Just in case you don't know what the Federal Reserve is, it is often simply called the Fed. It is the central bank of the United States. In a nutshell, the Fed is in charge of U.S. monetary policy. This means that the Federal Reserve's policies are followed by the financial institutions in the United States. I hope that makes sense. Let's keep going. The Federal Reserve Board, Federal Reserve, announced in a press release that 6 of the largest U.S. banks will participate in a climate scenario analysis pilot to assess financial risks. Which banks will take part in this exercise? Bank of America, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, and Wells Fargo will undergo the climate scenario analysis exercise, which will assess the resilience of financial institutions under different hypothetical climate scenarios. Look at this statement here. The Federal Reserve emphasized that the pilot will be strictly for information gathering purposes, calling it exploratory in nature, and that it will not have capital consequences. If it is strictly for information gathering purposes, do you think they are really telling us everything we need to know about this exercise? You will find out later on in this video why this exercise is strictly for information gathering purposes. If you actually think that only these 6 banks will be impacted, you need to think again because the article goes on to state. While the Federal Reserve's pilot is limited to 6 banks, climate scenario analysis is likely to be a reality for other financial institutions in the near future. In future, your financial institution will be impacted as well. It is something they are looking forward to doing all over the world. They believe in this manner, the fight against climate change can be won all over the world. Is this really about climate change, or there's more to it? Yes, I admit it sounds like a potential solution to climate change, but what if it goes beyond that? Everything will soon be clear to us. Let's continue. From Life site. Federal Reserve announces social credit system exercise to ensure banks comply with climate models. Climate finance is almost identical to that of the Chinese Communist Party's social credit score system. If the quote-unquote climate finance is nearly identical to the Chinese Communist Party's social credit score system, then in order to know what the Fed's social credit system will look like and how it will operate, we must first learn about the Chinese Communist Party's social credit score system. Someone is wondering, hey, brother, what exactly is the Chinese social credit score system? This short video explains everything, my dear.
By 2020, China plans to give all of its 1.4 billion citizens a personal score based on how they behave. So some people with low scores are already being punished if they want to travel. Nearly 11 million Chinese people can no longer fly, and 4 million are barred from trains. Next week, the program will start expanding nationwide. Ben Tracy is in China with what's behind the government's scoring system. Ben, this sounds like scary stuff. Good morning.
Good morning. The government here says it is trying to purify society by rewarding those who are trustworthy and punishing those who are not. So like the credit score that most Americans get for how they handle their finances, Chinese citizens are now getting social credit scores based on everything from whether they pay their taxes on time to how they cross the street. When Leo Hu recently tried to book a flight, he was told he was banned from flying because he's on the list of untrustworthy people. Leo is a journalist who was ordered by a court to apologize for a series of tweets he wrote and was then told his apology was insincere. I can't buy property. My child can't go to private school, he says. You feel you're being controlled by the list all the time. And the list is now getting longer, as every Chinese citizen is being assigned a social credit score, a fluctuating rating based on a range of behaviors. It's believed that community service and buying Chinese-made products can raise your score. Fraud, tax evasion, and smoking in non-smoking areas can drop it. If a score gets too low, a person can be banned from buying plane and train tickets, real estate, cars, and even high-speed internet. It's a good thing, this woman says. There should be punishment for people who can't behave. China's growing network of surveillance cameras makes all of this possible. The country already has an estimated 176 million cameras, and it plans to have more than 600 million installed by 2020.
It can recognize more than 4,000 vehicles.
Xu Li is the CEO of SenseTime, one of China's most successful artificial intelligence companies. It has created smart cameras for the government that can help catch criminals, but also track average citizens. This knows every person, every bike, every car, every bus.
You can tell whether it is an adult, a child, a male or female.
In several big cities in China, including here in Shanghai, the government is even tracking jaywalkers. Cameras record them going through intersections, zero in on their face, and then publicly shame them on nearby video screens. Ken DeWaskin has studied China's economic and political culture for more than 3 decades. He says how the new scoring system truly works is kept secret and could be easily abused by the government. How far into people's daily mundane activities does this go?
Well, I think that the government and the people running the plan would like it to go as deeply as possible to determine how to allocate benefits and also how to impact and shape their behavior.
Now, there are upsides for people the Chinese government considers trustworthy. They can actually get better interest rates at banks, they can get discounts on their energy bills, and China's largest online dating site reportedly even boosts the profiles of people with high social credit scores. Nora?
Total control. That is what a government can do with a social credit score. So, if this social credit system exercise is identical to China's, I believe you can already guess where this could lead. We are not done yet. The Federal Reserve has taken a major step in the direction of facilitating an ESG, environmental, social, and governance, compliant monetary network that effectively acts as a parallel system to that of the Chinese Communist Party's infamous social credit scoring system. Now that you already know what the Chinese Communist Party's infamous social credit scoring system is, the next thing to look out for is what the ESG does. They have explained it themselves that the ESG acts as a Trojan horse for the continuing centralization of the American financial system. The ESG, green transition, frequently popularized by powerful world governments and the Davos elite, has served as the main vehicle for this movement. Akin to the Chinese social credit score, which is used to coerce businesses, and, by extension, individuals, into specific actions, ESG rules force individuals and businesses in America to deploy capital through the gatekeepers of the system. So they are basically saying that you will be forced to do things you would not normally do in the absence of the ESG. From Fox Business. ESG scores similar to China's social credit system, designed to transform society, think tank director says. China's moral ranking system has similarities to ESG scores, Heartland Institute director says. Just in case you didn't already know, Heartland Institute is a think tank based in Illinois that promotes right-of-center approaches to economic and social problems. Do you really think they are telling us the truth? Listen to this. I don't believe that ESG scores are really being used for the reason that they say they are, Haskins told Fox News. By the way, Haskins is the director of the Heartland Institute. He continued to say, I think it's mostly about controlling society, and about pushing a left-wing agenda. They think in order to address something like climate change, in order to deal with problems related to pollution, to deal with social inequalities and racism and all this other stuff, you have to create a social credit scoring system or else these businesses are not going to do it on their own, Haskins added. Haskins believes ESG scores will soon apply to individuals. If you want to transform society through a social credit scoring system, you can do a lot of that through corporations and banks and financial institutions and Wall Street, but at some point, you probably are going to have to apply that to individuals as well, Haskins told Fox News. The average American has no power to force these companies to stop doing this, Haskins added. You're going to be impacted by it whether you like it or not, and the rules could change at any time. What happens to your freedom when a society is structured in such a way that you are forced to do things you would not normally do? The reason why it is strictly for information gathering purposes is to take control of you. The Hill. Biden is planning a new digital currency. Here's why you should be very worried. If the United States were to adopt a digital currency like the one discussed in Biden's executive order, it would be one of the most dramatic expansions of federal power ever made, one that could put individuals and businesses in grave danger of losing their social and economic freedoms. That is precisely what the leaders are looking forward to. They are laying the groundwork for a society in which individuals' daily activities can be tracked to ensure that you do not exceed certain limits, and if you do, you will be punished by the authorities. In one report about the development of a central bank digital currency, CBDC, published by the Federal Reserve in January, the Fed outlined a few examples of possible design choices for a digital dollar, including that a central bank might limit the amount of CBDC an end user could hold. Look at this right here. There are many reasons to believe Biden's plan for a digital dollar involves a design that will give the federal government and/or Federal Reserve control over much of society and the economy. Biden's executive order states that the CBDC and other policies governing digital assets must mitigate climate change and pollution and promote financial inclusion and equity. In fact, financial inclusion is mentioned 5 times in Biden's order, and equity and climate change are mentioned 4 times each. Their plans to combat climate change through monetary policies effectively give them control over everything you own. Lawmakers ask Fed to speed up central bank digital currency project. A bipartisan group of lawmakers wants the Federal Reserve to speed efforts to issue a digital dollar and thus prevent countries like China from endangering the U.S. position as the world's reserve currency. The lawmakers want the U.S. to launch its own digital currency to counter other nations doing the same. You know what they say. When 2 elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. What does it mean? It means that the weak get hurt in conflicts between the powerful. Or when 2 leaders fight, it is the followers that experience the fallout. Now that countries are competing for the highest-ranking currency in the world, we the citizens, especially the faithful children of God, will suffer the consequences. Because they are structuring a society that gives them total control over everything, you are currently in danger of losing your freedom. The time to get prepared and be ready for the Lord's second coming is now. Fox Business. Biden's proposal for a new digital currency is an attack on liberty. Unlike blockchain-based digital currencies such as Bitcoin, which are by design decentralized, a central bank digital currency would likely be programmable, meaning that it could be designed so that Americans could only use it for specific purposes. And it would be easy for banks and government agencies to track digital dollars and the people using them, unlike printed US dollars available today. I hope at this point of this presentation, you now have a clear understanding of their desire to control you and restrict your freedom in order to combat climate change. This brings us to our next questions. How exactly do they intend to accomplish this? How will they know whether or not you are complying with their climate change policies? I'm confident that the social credit system used by the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, already paints a picture of how they plan to implement this in your mind. However, that is not the only method they plan to use. Take a look at this from the Sociable website. Individual Carbon Footprint Tracker. Stay tuned, Alibaba President at World Economic Forum 2022. Carbon footprint trackers are another tool in the unelected globalist social credit system kit. Alibaba Group President Michael Evans announced that the Chinese multinational e-commerce platform would soon be launching carbon footprint trackers in an attempt to change people's shopping and travel behaviors. The carbon footprint tracker looks to operate similarly to the Chinese Communist Party's social credit system by rewarding people who do the right thing while punishing those who do the wrong thing. Alibaba Group President Michael Evans boasts at the World Economic Forum about the development of an individual carbon footprint tracker to monitor what you buy, what you eat, and where or how you travel.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
Some financial institutions have started implementing this. Mail online. Commonwealth Bank is now tracking your carbon footprint based on how you spend your money. Commonwealth Bank included a new feature on its internet banking that tells customers how many trees they've destroyed with their carbon footprint based on monthly spending. CBA's internet banking app displays the person's carbon footprint for the current month and examples of the damage they are causing, including the CO2 produced equivalent to the distance of driving a car. Please, you may pause the video and see the category breakdown and play to continue after that. Now look at this. The bank calculates a customer's carbon footprint based on the transactions made on your credit or debit cards. This means that the current card system will be phased out soon. Once it is replaced, the new one can assist them in tracking your daily activities. It doesn't end here, let's keep going. Commonwealth Bank says the data is private and that eventually, the data will be so specific that it can be broken down to individual transactions. We will be able to provide greater transparency for customers so that they can take actionable steps to reduce their environmental footprint. Just before we continue, please listen to what the Deputy Managing Director of the IMF says about how central bank digital currency, CBDC, would allow the government to precisely control what people can and cannot spend their money on.
Finally, the third way we think CBDC can improve financial inclusion is through what we call programmability. That is, CBDC can allow government agencies and private sector players to program, to create smart contracts, to allow targeted policy functions. For example, welfare payment. For example, consumption coupon. For example, food stamp. By programming CBDC, those money can be precisely targeted for what kind of people can own and what kind of use this money can be utilized. For example, for food.
Yes, you heard him right. Your money can be specifically targeted for your intended use. They are designing the system in such a way that if they believe you are not abiding by their policies, they can cut off or disconnect your account and prevent you from buying or selling. They're talking about financial inclusion, but it's actually about financial exclusion. Australian bank begins linking customer transactions to carbon footprint. Some worry that such programs could one day become mandatory and impose restrictions on purchases made by customers who go over their carbon allowance, even though they were initially marketed as a convenient way for people to monitor their consumption habits and the purported impact they have on the environment. Technocrats seek to use the public's anxiety over climate change, as we previously noted, in conjunction with climate lockdowns to exert more financial control over people. For environmental experts made such a suggestion in the science publication Nature as a way to lower carbon emissions worldwide. All adults would get an equal tradable carbon allowance that reduces over time in line with national carbon targets, according to the carbon allowance card that would be given to everyone. The strategy would be a national mandatory policy, according to the authors. Anyone exceeding the limit would be required to buy more units on the personal carbon market from individuals who had extra to offer. Carbon units would be deducted from the personal budget with every payment of transport fuel, home heating fuels, and electricity bills. It is made explicit in the proposal that the methods for calculating a person's intake of carbon units for travel would work on the basis of tracking the user's movement history. According to the authors, widespread compliance to COVID-19 lockdown regulations has paved the way for even more intrusive dictatorship, and as a result, people may be more prepared to accept the tracking and limitations related to PCAs to achieve a safer climate. All these are signs that we are leaving in the last days. Jesus is coming sooner than when we first believed. The time to get prepared and ready is now. Australia's largest bank says it will stop banking with companies with no climate change plan. One of Australia's big four banks has pledged to its shareholders that it won't bank with large customers who have no climate transition plan. Large customers that choose not to have a transition plan on climate change by 2025, we will not be able to bank them. This tracking system has already been implemented in China, the United States is moving in that direction, and other countries like Australia are now actively involved. All of these last-day events are indications of how close our Savior's return is. These warnings serve as a reminder to spend enough time with God in prayer and through His Word so that we can be ready to return home with Him when He finally appears in His glory. Based on these evidences, we can clearly see that their intention to control your movement and to restrict your freedom in order for you to comply with their policies is a preparation ground for the coming Sunday law. Please, just before I continue, let me draw a clear distinction here before someone misunderstands me. Saturday is the Sabbath of God. Even though Sunday is not the Sabbath of God, it is not yet the mark of the beast. Yes, Sunday is the mark of the beast's authority. Going to church on Sunday does not mean you are already receiving the mark of the beast. It is just like one would go to church meetings on any other ordinary day. Sunday becomes the mark of the beast when you are being forced to worship on Sunday by law. So, Sunday worship by law is the mark of the beast. I hope that makes sense. If you still don't quite get it, please re-watch this part of the video until you understand it, or you can comment if you have other concerns. Now, in an effort to provide solution to the climate change problems, they are going to force people to rest on Sundays. They are going to force you to worship on Sunday by law so that the carbon emission can be reduced. If you do not abide by this law, if you do not follow the Sunday law, which they will know with the help of their system to track your daily activities, you will be seen as someone who is opposed to the solution to the climate change crisis, and your bank account will be frozen or disconnected so you cannot buy or sell, as the Bible says in Revelation 13 verse 17, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Not only will your ability to buy or sell be denied, but you will face severe persecution as well. Look at this from Today I Found Out website. The first blue law, although not called that at the time, was enacted in colonial Virginia in 1610, and it mandated church attendance, at both morning and afternoon services. On Sundays, a first-time offender lost his provision and allowance for the whole week. If you don't worship this way, you don't get your allowance. In our time, if you don't worship on Sunday by law, you cannot buy or sell. Let's keep reading. Those who committed a second offense, in addition to losing his allowance, would be whipped. Now you're being persecuted. A third violation was, supposedly, punished by death, though there is debate over whether accounts of early blue laws were in some cases exaggerated or not. This history will be repeated. Already they are calling for one world religion to mitigate climate change in COP27. Now listen to this. The time of trouble such as never was, is soon to open upon us, and we shall need an experience which we do not now possess, and which many are too indolent to obtain. It is often the case that trouble is greater in anticipation than in reality, but this is not true of the crisis before us. The most vivid presentation cannot reach the magnitude of the ordeal. The Great Controversy, pages 621, 622, 1911. But more than that, God says in Matthew 5 verse 10, "Blessed are those who have been persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." God knew this, and He is encouraging us to depend solely on Him for survival. In the next video, we will look at what you can do to avoid the mark of the beast, how you can survive the great time of tribulation that awaits you as a faithful child of God. By the way, there are some things that I think you need to know about the coming Sunday law. An example is how you can prepare physically for the impending Sunday law and what you can do during the Sunday law times. The link is in the description below. You may get a copy as another way to amplify your support for this channel. Watch this video next and see how you can avoid the National Sunday Law or the mark of the beast and still survive the tribulation.